So my in-laws and my husband, specifically though his mom and dad, they hated me because they can't control me, and eventually they all got sick of it, and I got a divorce from their precious baby boy. Well, that's not the end of the story, because I'm pregnant, and when I tell you something insane just happened, you might not believe it. After 8 years, my marriage is over. I can't believe it. I was dragged into this and manipulated by my husband's family, and now they're trying to take my son away from me as one final blow to my pride. For some backstory, I've been married to my husband for 8 years. We have a 7-year-old son together, and I work in cybersecurity. We met when his mother hired my company to do some back-end work on her business website. We exchanged numbers and met for coffee a few times. At the time, I did not know much about his family or him. I live in a bit of a bubble and don't keep up with local gossip. After we dated for about 3 months, I found out his family is very rich and influential to our town. They're like old money or something, very well known and respected in our town and state. They donate to like one of the major political parties and have multiple chains of businesses in the state, along with shares in major companies that have been held in the family for centuries. They've been asking to meet for a while, or should I say demanding to meet considering what I know now. But at the time I thought it was super endearing and sweet that his family wanted to meet me. I'd already met his mom briefly. His dad seemed nice, and his older sister was too preoccupied with her kids for proper introductions. She had 2 boys, a toddler and a newborn. His dad seemed very interested in me, my upbringing and what I did for a living, and my plans for the future. I was young and naive and did not understand how predatory this family was at the time. Plus, I was really digging Brian, so I kind of had on rose-colored glasses. I didn't see the red flags at all, and when I didn't, I ignored them. Well, after just 6 months of dating, Brian was already talking about marriage, and he was saying how much he liked me already and how he saw us as having a bright future together. I was young and naive, so I ate it up. I thought I had truly found my soulmate. Bear in mind, I was only 23 at the time, and anyways, after just 8 months of dating, Brian and I were engaged in planning our wedding. His parents insisted on paying for the whole thing, which sounds great from the outside looking in. The thing is, they also wanted control over the whole thing. His mother especially would veto all my decisions, the dress, the food, the drinks, the flowers. I wanted something summery, yellow, oranges for my bouquet and floral arrangements, but she insisted on white because it was more elegant. She found colorful things tacky. I wanted simple stuff for my menu, but Brian's father insisted on having lobster, caviar, and quail. When I picked out my dress, my mom was there. She liked the dress that I picked out. I chose ivory instead of pure white because I thought it would be, photographed better. I hate the way white dresses look in photos. Sue me. When his mom caught wind of this, she insisted I change it, even going as far as to suggest that they would not pay for it if it wasn't white. When I suggested I could just pay for it myself, they did not like it. They wanted complete control over my wedding. They made Brian convince me to change the dress, and in the end I caved and got a white one. They tried to appease me by getting the same style of dress, but it just wasn't the same. Brian told me I should trust his mom's judgment because she handled events like this all the time, and they usually turned out to be great. But I thought it was unfair that I had no say in my own wedding. In the end, his mom assented the white bouquets with a little bit of yellow decoration, but I could tell that she was not happy about it. For what it's worth, the wedding did go off well. We had our honeymoon in Dubai, and we conceived our son. 9 months later, we welcomed him into the world. I want to say that during the 9 months I was pregnant, Brian's family kept hounding me to quit my job and stay home while I was pregnant. I'm very good at my job, and so it's not physically or mentally taxing for me, plus my job offers paid maternity leave for long-time employees. When I reached 6 months, I got my time off to stay at home and the rest of the prepare for the baby. Even then, they were still harassing me to leave my job, saying there's no way I could be a good mom if I was working all the time. They kept saying that Brian made plenty of money to take care of me and the kid. Here's the thing. I didn't want to hand over all my financial freedom to my husband. I enjoyed having my own money, to do as I please. Heck, the only reason I got into my field is because it offered such great money. And the fact that I like computers is a plus. I'm not giving up my job. I didn't care how much they whined and moaned about it. I would be a working mother. After my son was born, their harassment intensified. They went so far as to try pressurizing my boss into firing me or giving me a severance package. But my boss explained to them that I'm a team lead, and it would be very hard to find somebody with my level of expertise who's also familiar with company's practices. I was young, but I'd been working there since I was studying in college. I know how the place works better than most of the people working there now. In the end, he refused to fire me, so they were out of luck. They backed off for a while, or backed into the shadows so that they could calculate a different approach, I guess. Now, you all may be thinking, where was Brian during all this? He was right there with them, unfortunately. He kept saying that he'd give me a weekly or monthly allowance, more than what my job pays, and I could start a little at-home business if I wanted. But it would be better for me to be home with our son. He needs his mother. Brian would say it over and over, and I kept telling him it was more than just money that I get from my job. It was personally fulfilling, and I actually like my coworkers. When I got off maternity leave, I was allowed to work at home for a while. The harassment over my job never stopped, even as my son grew older and started attending school. Brian kept asking me if I wanted to go into a partnership with his mom, and she wanted to start an event planning business to supplement her chain of flower shops. I know nothing about event planning, and owning my own business sounds like a more stressful and like a lot more work than what I was currently doing. He started giving me this lecture about how his family's super close-knit and liked being in the business together and uplifting each other. This was when I started noticing a pattern, and I asked him if he had any autonomy at all, or if he just goes along with whatever his family wanted. I asked him if he would ever make any decisions on his own free will, without the input from his family, of course. Well, that seemed to hit a nerve, and he totally got really mad. He said unlike me, he actually values his family and doesn't just push them away like I do. I told him I wasn't pushing anyone away, I just didn't want to be a lapdog like him. The whole argument devolved into a fight, and since then we've never been able to see eye to eye at work-life balance stuff. He's able to go out and work all day and come home when he pleases, but I have to be concerned about our son. I mean, the hypocrisy is incredible. And I know the end game is that they want to complete control over me. How I make my money, how I raise my kids, how and where we live. I've always been financially independent, and I'm not giving that up. I told that to all of them, so, they know it. Now today, 8 years later, my husband has served me with divorce papers. He's told me he never really loved me. He didn't even like me, he just used me because his parents would not get off his back about having an heir before he got too old. I'm shocked and devastated, and I understand our marriage was strained, but all he had to do was grow a pair and stop caving to his parents' every whim, and I think we would have been much better off. Well, what's worse is this. He's asking for custody of our kid, and I guess since they can't control me, they're going to remove me from the picture completely and control my son. I talked to my parents about it, and they connected me with a lawyer that they knew in the area. She specializes in family issues and is very, very good in that sort of area. I've been a mess ever since Brian served me with these papers, and I can't believe he would want to tear our family apart like this. Like, it never meant anything to him. His family has so much power and influence that I doubt I'll be able to get anything out of them. However, he is not taking my son. I'll make sure I do everything in my power to beat him. Update number 1. Hey guys. Sorry it's been a while with everything happening. I don't really have time to sit around and write an update. The divorce proceedings ended a month ago, and I'm in my own place and I have my own son. Thank God. I'll go into the details of what happened in a moment, but first I want to clear the air. A lot of people seem to have not read very well. I made it clear, crystal clear, that I got pregnant very soon after we got married. Also bear in mind that the wedding was the first time I saw my in-laws' controlling ways. I was mostly content to let them decide most of the stuff because they were paying for it. The dress and the flowers were a sticking point for me because they felt very personal, and by that point I was in too deep. And I did love Brian. The work stuff upset me, but I don't think people really realize how hard it is to just up and leave your marriage. That's not a decision to be made lightly, and by that point I had a son. I had to consider how leaving Brian would affect him, which is why this divorce is so hard for me. On top of that, my son goes to a fancy private school, and I was worried I would not be able to pay those tuition fees. That could definitely be grounds for the judge to give him to his dad. Luckily, the lawyer my parents recommended was top-notch, and the judge was empathetic towards me. My lawyer argued that I was impressionable, and when Brian preyed on me, and their lawyer argued that I hated his family even though they had no proof of it. I showed text messages of the conversations I had where I refused to quit my job. On top of that, I was in charge of the child rearing. My husband wasn't about to stop working as much to spend more time with our son, but I was expected to. Ultimately, it was up to my son to decide who he wanted to stay with. And in the end, he chose me. Well, of course, I was the one who took care of him the most, and his dad can barely remember when his birthday is. Anyways, the judge decided that my son would be with me, and my husband would take care of all his expenses, and I mean all of them. Down to it if he needed to bandage a boo-boo. I still live in the same house as him until I get approved for the house that I'll be renting to own. Thank goodness I didn't tell them, gaslighting me into quitting my job, because now I have enough money to save up and be able to afford a house of my own, nearby to where my son goes to school, and Brian's family has been trying to persuade me into staying at his house, but I told them to go, play with themselves. I want nothing to do with them or their manipulation anymore. My son and I will hopefully be out of this place in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Brian will have visitation rights so he can come see our son every once in a while. I told him he was allowed to pick him up from school sometimes if he wanted to. He seems really bitter about the outcome, and I guess his family deluded him into thinking that he would win the case easily, but he came out with the rotten end of the stick. The judge saw it right through the stupid heir manipulation crap, and I didn't feel sorry for him at all. I can't wait to be out of his house. Update number 2. It's been a few months now, and I didn't think I'd be writing this update. I thought after moving out of my ex-husband's house, that would have been it. To get you guys up to speed, I've moved out of Brian's house about 2.5 weeks after my last update. My son and I have been doing very fine on our own. He's adjusted to the change very well, which isn't surprising considering his dad wasn't around that much to begin with. Brian was almost always working. He doesn't even use his visitation rights much, and I think in the 8th month since the divorce, he's taken our son for the weekend maybe 5 or 6 times. It's lessened a lot since we moved out, and even for his birthday, he didn't come by, just FaceTimed and sent a gift card with some money for us to go out for dinner. But that's not what this update is about. I'm here to tell you that Brian has died. 2 weeks ago, he was involved in a car crash with a drunk driver. They rushed him to the hospital, operated on him and everything, but there was no saving him. His sister called me that day after just to tell me what happened. The funeral was a week ago, and it got lots of media coverage since their family is a big deal. I took my son to it, and of course, despite everything, that's still his dad. Brian's family didn't seem very happy to see me. There was particularly dirty look I got from his sister, which was caught on camera, passed around in tabloids and gossip sites, and speculated on to no end. The reason for our divorce, or at least the reason given to the media, was irreconcilable differences, which I guess is accurate if you bend your imagination enough. I have had media personnel and gossip sites reached out to me and asked about my relationship with Brian. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted to tell them everything. They tried their hardest to get their hands on the documents from the divorce hearing, but Brian's family did their best to make sure it was hidden from the public, while also getting the documents sealed away. Imagine if I took this opportunity to show the public who these people really were. I'm not sure what's going to happen now that Brian's gone, though. My son's school fees aren't going to pay themselves, and there's no way I would be able to afford it on my own. Like, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars per year. I'd hate pulling him out because he has so many nice friends there, so I'm hoping the school will give me a little bit of grace considering what happened to Brian. If not, I'll just have to figure something out. After everything that's happened over the last year, I don't want to stress my son out with yet another big change. He deserves some kind of stability, and I'm going to try my best to give him that. Update number 3. Well, I have even more unexpected developments. Remember how I was so worried about affording my son's school fees? Well, it turns out I had nothing to worry about at all. So let me explain everything in detail. Brian worked at his father's company and had been since he graduated high school. He worked there all throughout college. His dad was basically grooming him just to inherit the empire that they've been building once he passed away. Now, a few years ago, Brian's dad gave him a 1/3 ownership of the entire empire. I wasn't made sure of this until it happened, and of course, because our marriage was pretty much in shambles at the time. Now, Brian's been dead for almost 4 months at this point, and I'd heard nothing from his family up until last weekend. They asked to meet me and my son at one of their offices. I asked them exactly what they were wanting to meet about, and they said that it had to do with Brian's death. There was no way I was meeting them without a lawyer, so I called the lady who represented me during the divorce proceedings, and she agreed to accompany us. When we got there, the whole family was there along with their lawyers, and they basically laid everything out bare. Brian died without a will, and when a person dies without a will, the state's inheritance law dictates what'll happen to their estate. And the law says that the estate goes to the next of kin. Brian's next of kin is our son. So my son now owns all of Brian's assets along with 1/3 of the company. I wish you all could have seen the looks on Brian's family faces. The looks so bitter, dejected. Apparently this whole time they've been trying to find a way to skirt the inheritance laws to reclaim Brian's portion of the company. The only way they can get it back is if my son signs it over to them. But since my son is a minor, I would have to be the one to sign it. The entire meeting was to convince me to sign. They even offered me money for it. My lawyer asked me what I wanted to do, and I told Brian's family they owed me an apology. And I wanted it to be a public apology. I also wanted them to unseal the documents from the divorce proceedings so that the media could see the real reason why Brian and I got divorced. Once my demands were met, then we could negotiate. They needed to show me they were serious about this and not try to control me or my son. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do about Brian's house or the money and his accounts. To be fair, with everything he left for us, my son and I have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of our days, in any part of the country we want. I'm glad we have this silver lining after everything that we've been through. Final update. It's me again. This is the last time I'm going to update this because I'm a little tired of talking about this situation. So, where we left off last, I was sorting out my son's inheritance after his father tragically passed away. Now, I'm here to tell you, we're all packing up and moving to the West Coast. I'll explain how we got there. It's been like 8 months since I've been letting my lawyer handle all the nitty-gritty stuff concerning Brian's estates. We sold his house and land because there was no way I was moving back into that place. Apparently, quite a few people in the area had been oogling and ogling the house since Brian's passing, so it got taken off the market pretty dang quick. Then came the matter of the apology and the releasing of the documents from the divorce. They kept dragging their feet, saying it would take time to unseal the documents. Well, I told them I would wait, but they weren't happy about that. They were getting pressure from the board because Brian's seat at the table had been empty for months. And he had a lot of voting power which could influence important business decisions. I told them that if they needed those shares so badly, then they'd be, hurrying up because I wasn't signing anything until I got what I wanted. When they realized how serious I really was, they tried more underhanded tactics. First, they issued a half-butted apology, didn't even say what they were apologizing for, and hid it away somewhere deep in one of their websites, then promised they would release the documents at a later date. I told them that's not what I asked for. Once they've given me what I asked for, I will let them buy the shares back. Finally, after around 6 months of dragging their feet, they gave up a proper, public apology, along with releasing the documents from the divorce. To say the press had a field day would be an understatement, and this turned into quite PR of a nightmare. If that wasn't enough of a humbling experience, they had to sign up with a contract, stating that they would pay me 1/3 of the company's value over the next 5 years in exchange for the shares inherited by my son. Let's just say they weren't so happy about that. After all that noise, me and my son are moving to the West Coast to be closer to the family. The money from his father will be used to pay for his schooling and buy a nice home there. No, I'm not quitting my job. My company has a branch out there, so I'll be transferring. I just need to be as far away from Brian's family as possible if I'm going to close this stressful chapter of my life. So I do want to talk about Beth demanding the public apology. I did read a lot of comments that said she should have let her late ex-husband rest in peace and not try to reveal all these things that she was doing because it was a little petty. But at the same time, I saw other comments that were totally against that. They were like, no, she needs a little bit of justification. She needs everybody to know the truth, and she just wanted everyone to see her in-laws apologize and release those documents. I want to know, if you guys were in OP's position, which route you would have taken. Maybe get a little more money for the share of the business and keep the documents sealed up. Or release the documents and have everybody know what you wanted them to know in the first place, and maybe not get as much money on the back end from selling the shares. Either way, I want to know which route you guys would have gone. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every single day, and if you guys want to be a part of these daily story readings, all you have to do is subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification. Have an amazing day. I'll see you tomorrow, and just remember, it's pretty cool to be kind. See ya.